In a few sealed titanium tubes, resting on the dusty surface of Mars, may lie the answer to one of humanity's oldest questions. Are we alone? For decades, scientists have searched for signs of life beyond Earth. We've scanned the skies with radio telescopes, studied distant exoplanets with the James Webb Space Telescope, and probed the outer worlds of our solar system. Yet the most profound discovery might come not from a distant star, but from our closest planetary neighbor. NASA's Perseverance rover is collecting samples of Martian rock and soil from areas once covered by ancient rivers and lakes. These are not random scoops of dust, but carefully chosen cores drilled from sites where water once flowed, places that, billions of years ago, may have provided the conditions life needs to thrive. Each sample has been sealed to protect it from contamination, awaiting the day a return mission will bring them safely back to Earth. The stakes could not be higher. If, within these samples, scientists detect clear biosignatures, organic molecules arranged in patterns that only biology can create, or microscopic structures resembling living cells, it would mean life exists, or once existed, on Mars. The implications would be extraordinary. Life on two neighboring worlds would suggest that biology is not a rare accident confined to Earth, but a natural outcome wherever the right conditions appear. It would transform our understanding of evolution, planetary science, and humanity's place in the universe. These samples are real. They exist now, sealed beneath the Martian sky. And within them may be the greatest discovery in the history of science. The search for life on Mars is not abstract. It is a carefully planned mission already in progress. In February 2021, NASA's Perseverance rover touched down inside Jezero Crater, an ancient basin once filled by a river delta. Billions of years ago, that delta carried clay, silt, and water into a lake more than 40 kilometers across. On Earth, such environments are excellent at preserving traces of life. If Mars ever hosted biology, Jezero is one of the most promising places to find evidence. Perseverance is equipped with a sophisticated drill and a suite of instruments designed to select the most scientifically valuable rocks. When the rover identifies a target, layers of sediment, mineral veins, or ancient lakebed deposits, it cores a sample, seals it inside an ultra-clean titanium tube, and stores it in a protective chamber. Each tube is no larger than a marker pen, yet together they may hold the key to answering one of science's most profound questions. This is only the first step. The real challenge lies in bringing those samples home. NASA, in collaboration with the European Space Agency, is developing the Mars Sample Return Mission, a complex multi-stage campaign unlike anything attempted before. If approved and funded, it will launch in the early 2030s. Here is how it would work. A lander carrying a small fetch rover and a Mars ascent vehicle would touch down near Perseverance's cache. The fetch rover would collect the sealed tubes and load them into the ascent vehicle, a rocket small enough to launch from the Martian surface. For the first time in history, a spacecraft would lift off from another planet. Once in orbit, the ascent vehicle would release the container of samples to rendezvous with an established orbiter. That orbiter would then set course for Earth, delivering the samples to a secure facility designed for one purpose: to study them under the strictest conditions of planetary protection. The timeline is ambitious. If everything proceeds as planned, the samples could arrive on Earth in the late 2030s. For scientists, that wait is not long. Some have devoted their entire careers to this goal, knowing that the knowledge inside those tubes could redefine biology, geology, and our place in the cosmos. For now, the samples remain on Mars, silent, sealed, and waiting. But the plan to return them is real, and if successful, humanity will hold in its hands the first material ever brought back from the surface of another planet. Why focus so much effort, time, and billions of dollars on returning a few tubes of rock and dust from Mars? The answer lies in the accumulating body of evidence, clues that strongly suggest Mars may have once been, or may still be, a living world. The first and most compelling reason is water. Almost every place on Earth where liquid water exists, life is present. Mars today looks barren and dry, but orbital surveys and rover missions have revealed a different story of its past. Ancient river valleys snake across the surface. Satellite images show deltas and shorelines carved by flowing water. Minerals, such as clays and sulfates, formed only in the presence of water, are abundant. Billions of years ago, Mars had a thicker atmosphere and a climate that allowed vast lakes and even oceans to exist. If water persisted for millions of years, it would have provided time and stability for life to emerge. The second clue comes from organic molecules. In 2018, NASA's Curiosity rover detected complex organics preserved in Martian rocks that are over 3 billion years old. These carbon-based compounds are the building blocks of life. Their presence does not prove biology. Many can also be formed by non-living chemistry, but it shows Mars had the ingredients necessary for life. A third piece of evidence is methane in the atmosphere. On Earth, most methane is produced by living organisms, from microbes in wetlands to cows grazing in fields. Mars orbiters and Curiosity have detected episodic methane spikes, rising and falling with the seasons. The source remains uncertain. Geological processes, such as reactions between water and rock, can produce methane. But the irregular patterns have kept alive the tantalizing possibility of biology just beneath the surface. There are also hints of briny liquid water today. Some studies suggest thin streaks that appear seasonally on Martian slopes, called recurring slope lineae, could be caused by salty water seeping through the soil. More recently, radar measurements hinted at the possibility of subsurface reservoirs beneath the southern polar ice cap. Whether these features truly represent liquid water is debated, but if they do, they could provide refuges for microbial life, protected from the harsh radiation that bombards the surface. Taken together, these clues build a compelling case for further investigation. Mars once had flowing rivers, long-lived lakes, essential chemistry, and perhaps even temporary oases of liquid water today. Every new mission adds weight to the possibility that biology either took hold in the past or might still persist underground. Yet none of this evidence by itself is definitive. Organic molecules, methane, and unusual geological features can all be explained by non-biological processes. That is why the Mars Sample Return mission is so critical. By studying these rocks and soils in laboratories on Earth, scientists will finally be able to apply the full power of modern instruments, tools far too complex to ever fit on a rover. If life ever arose on Mars, even at the microbial scale, the sample's perseverance is collecting may contain the proof. When we imagine life on Mars, it's tempting to picture green plants waving in the Martian wind or strange creatures roaming the desert plains. But if life exists or once existed, on Mars, scientists believe it would be far more modest. The most realistic candidates are microorganisms, tiny life forms adapted to extreme environments. On Earth, such organisms are known as extremophiles. They thrive in conditions once thought impossible for biology. Inside volcanic vents at temperatures above 100 degrees Celsius, in the freezing brine of Antarctica's subglacial lakes, or deep underground where no sunlight has ever penetrated. Some endure intense radiation, others survive on little more than minerals and chemical energy. These examples show that life is astonishingly adaptable, capable of colonizing niches that appear hostile to anything we would normally call habitable. Mars offers several potential refuges where such organisms could survive. The surface is harsh, bathed in ultraviolet radiation, exposed to cosmic rays, and bone-dry for most of the year. But just a few centimeters below the ground, conditions improve. Subsurface layers could shield life from radiation, and tiny films of water might exist in salty soils that absorb atmospheric moisture. More intriguing is the possibility of subsurface aquifers. If reservoirs of liquid water do persist beneath the ice caps or within porous rock, they could provide stable, long-term habitats. On Earth, microbial communities have been discovered kilometers underground, cut off from sunlight for millions of years, surviving entirely on chemical energy from reactions between water and minerals. Mars, with its volcanic history and water-bearing rocks, could host similar ecosystems. Another question is whether Martian life would resemble Earth's biology or represent something entirely different. If Earth and Mars exchange material through asteroid impacts, as evidence suggests, they may share a biological lineage. Microbes ejected from one planet could have seeded the other in a process called panspermia. In that case, Martian organisms might use DNA, proteins, and familiar biochemistry. But there is another, more radical possibility, a second genesis. If life on Mars arose independently, it could be based on a different chemistry altogether, perhaps using alternative molecules to store information and catalyze reactions. Finding such a form of life would be even more profound than finding Earth-like microbes. It would prove that biology is not a singular fluke, but a universal process that can emerge through multiple pathways. For now, we cannot know which scenario is true. What scientists expect, however, is that if life is present on Mars today, it is likely microbial, probably hidden underground, and almost certainly microscopic. Even a single living cell in a Martian rock would be enough to answer the question that has haunted humanity for centuries. The sample's perseverance in collecting could reveal these forms through chemical traces, fossilized cell structures, or even dormant microbes waiting for the right conditions to awaken. Each possibility, however humble, carries consequences that would transform how we see life across the universe. If the Mars samples prove life exists or once existed, the implications would be enormous, rippling across science, philosophy, religion, and even geopolitics. It would not be a discovery confined to the laboratory. It would be a discovery that reshapes how humanity understands itself. For science, the impact would be immediate. Biology, as we know it, is based entirely on one data point: Earth. Every model of life's origin, every assumption about evolution, every attempt to define what is universal comes from this single example. Finding life on Mars would double that data set overnight. Even if Martian organisms resemble terrestrial microbes, the differences would reveal which aspects of biology are fundamental and which are accidents of Earth's history. If, on the other hand, Martian life has an independent origin built on unfamiliar chemistry, then the conclusion would be inescapable. Life is not a rare fluke, but a common outcome of planetary evolution. For astronomy and planetary science, the discovery would open new doors. If life arose on both Earth and Mars in the same solar system, then the odds of life emerging on exoplanets, worlds orbiting distant stars, skyrocket. Every potentially habitable exoplanet discovered by telescopes like James Webb would no longer be a question of could life exist there, but how many kinds of life are there? The universe would shift in our minds from silent emptiness to a landscape teeming with possibility. For humanity's philosophy and culture, the questions would be profound. For centuries, thinkers have debated whether we are alone in the cosmos. Religions and worldviews would wrestle with the idea that creation or emergence of life is not unique to Earth. For some traditions, the discovery might affirm the vastness and creativity of the universe. For others, it could challenge long-held beliefs about humanity's special place. But across cultures, the sense of perspective would be undeniable. We are not the sole living story in the cosmos. For society and politics, practical questions would emerge. How should Martian life be treated, especially if it is still alive? International agreements, like the Outer Space Treaty, prohibit harmful contamination of other worlds. But they were written before such a discovery was realistic. Should Martian microbes be considered part of Earth's biosphere once they arrive here, or kept isolated forever? Would nations cooperate to study them, or compete to control them? These debates could reshape space policy for decades. And finally, for the future of exploration, the stakes would rise. Human missions to Mars, long imagined as the next great leap, would face new ethical challenges. Colonization might risk disturbing or even destroying native ecosystems. At the same time, the discovery of life could fuel unprecedented motivation to explore, turning Mars from a barren frontier into a world of biological significance. In short, the discovery would not just answer one question. It would spark 1,000 new ones. Questions about the nature of life, the future of humanity, and the destiny of exploration itself.